Hey everybody, my name's Spooky. I'm a top 500 Mei player, and today I'm going to be giving you 10 tips on how you should be playing Mei. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe for more Mei and Overwatch guides, and go follow my Twitch channel so you can take notes on how I play Mei live. That's at twitch.tv/TSG_spooky. I have heard that following me on Twitch does grant you an immediate 10% skill increase. Hey, you heard nothing from me though. Anyways, let's get started. Number 10, use your primary more often. One of the biggest habits I've been seeing of lower ranked Mei players is that they're using their secondary fire, their icicle, way too often. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're out of range of somebody and you're trying to go for those headshots, use that icicle as much as you want. Personally, I spam the heck out of it. I'm never not shooting my icicle if I'm not in range of my primary. But the moment I get close enough to somebody, I'm typically using my primary for 3 reasons. 1, it instantly slows them down, making them an easier target for you and for your teammates. This makes it way easier to focus down enemies as a team, and really does equate to more secured kills. The second reason is it does more damage. If you're playing against good players, it's going to be hard to hit headshots. Players that know how to strafe, move, take cover, it's almost impossible to get headshots, especially when they're up in your face. Icicle does 75 damage per shot without a headshot, while your primary freeze does 100 damage per second. Now, over 5 seconds, that equates to about 100 damage difference between your primary and your secondary. So the primary does do more damage, headshots out of the equation. This means that you should be using primary on just about everything that doesn't have a head hitbox or can't receive headshots. This means on Orisa Fortify, this means on Reinhardt Shield, if you're in range for equipment like turret, immortality, on a wrecking ball in ball form, literally anything that doesn't have a head hitbox, you should be using your primary 100% of the time. I did want to make that announcement because I get so many comments asking me why I'm using my primary freeze on a Rhine Shield and on a fortified Orisa, because it does more damage. And I like to think that's probably just a remnant of Overwatch 1 when the primary didn't do any damage at all, and you really didn't want to use that on things like that. Although I will still argue for a case for stun locking Reinhardt with your primary. And the third reason I like to use primary as much as possible is because it has collateral, which means it actually pierces multiple enemies. So even if you're shooting one target, you might actually be damaging another target as well at the same time. So I tell people all the time, your primary fire with Mei is your keystone damage that you should be using 90% of the time whenever you can. Tip number 9, always play corners when you can. This means every single opportunity that you have to play behind cover or play a corner, some kind of natural cover on the map, try to utilize that as much as possible. This is going to mitigate the amount of damage and the amount of risks that you take, which means that you're not going to have to waste your abilities like wall or cryo to keep yourself alive, which means you can use them for better things like blocking enemy abilities or separating enemies with your wall, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. In a basic sense, I like to think about positioning in Overwatch as 2 different things: corners and kill boxes. Corners are where you play your natural cover, which is where kind of like key spots that you want to hold as a player. And then kill boxes are the space that you need to take to get to the next corner. You want to spend the least amount of time as possible in these kill boxes as you can, because that's where you're going to be very vulnerable to enemy damage. And it's kind of what we mean when we say you're out of position. But obviously you need to push through these kill boxes, so push through them as quick as you can. That's what we mean by taking space and then pushing up to the next corner to hold. So as a Mei player, you should be looking for this natural cover to play as much as you can, and then when you need to push forward, whether it's you have an opportunity, your tank made the space so you guys can push up, or you need to push up yourself to make that space, make sure you spend as little time as possible in those kill boxes. Ooh, baby, number 8. Don't be afraid to take cross angles with Mei. Now, this is a spicy take, but the more I do it, the more I see the value in what this does. Now, it's not new to players that taking multiple angles against an enemy is really good to take space and apply pressure to the enemy team. But Mei's always been a tank-centric hero, so she typically plays near her tank. But with the added damage that she has in the removal of the second tank in Overwatch, it makes a little bit more sense for Mei to every now and then take a cross angle when your team is struggling to push through a choke or any kind of space. Now, this does not mean you need to secure kills. This literally just means you need to play safe, play a good cross angle, and just shoot the enemy so it takes pressure off your front line. The reason Mei is good at this is because if someone tries to contest you while you're taking that cross angle, whether it be 1 or even 2 people, you can either 1, actually win that fight, or 2, live long enough to where the people pushing up through main can actually secure kills or take that space while you're living. Now, this is just a little bit more of an advanced lesson, but if you take anything away from this, it just means that every now and then it's okay to play away from your team as Mei. She can actually brawl out 1v1, 1v2 with quite a few heroes. But I still recommend playing next to your tank like 90% of of the time. Tip number 7. When it comes to using your Cryo, it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, if you've watched my Mei guide, I've talked about how Cryo should be used to block enemy abilities. Now, continuing off that, it's better to be safe than sorry as far as using it before than after you get hit with these abilities. Even if you don't know for sure they're going to use that ability on you, if it looks like they're about to, use that Cryo anyways. So if Sig's prepping a rock to throw at you, Cryo. If Orisa looks like she might javelin you, Cryo. If Roadhog is just looking at you, licking his lips like he's about to throw a hook at you, Cryo. If Reinhardt's pushing up with this dead look in his eyes like he's about to just absolutely eviscerate your team with a shatter, Cryo. The thing I kick myself about the most, and probably my worst habit, is that I hold Cryo way too long. I may see a Roadhog and he looks like he's about to hook me, but in my brain I'm like, okay, well, I don't know for sure yet, so I'm going to hold my Cryo in case he doesn't. And by the time I got done with that thought, I've already been hooked by a hog and I'm already dead in their backline. My point being, don't be afraid to be more liberal with your Cryo. It's there to keep you alive, so use it. Tip number 6, and this is a super easy one to implement. Use your primary on tanks as much as you can. Since tanks have a giant hitbox, they're super vulnerable the slower they get. And there's one thing that Mei is great at doing, slowing down tanks. That's why if I'm in range of almost about any tank, I am just laying on the primary fire. Wrecking balls rolling by, I'm slowing that sucker down. Hogs trying to get away, primary freeze. D.Va's trying to fly out of a fight, primary freeze. That one's my favorite, by the way, and it looks hilarious. Make sure you do it. Reinhardt's holding his shield, primary freeze, because guess what happens the moment he drops his shield? He starts getting slowed. And this is what I kind of meant about earlier when I was talking about stun locking Reinhardt's. It forces them to hold up shield or else they lose their mobility. So just lay on your primary freeze on a Reinhardt, force him to hold that shield. He's still taking 100 damage per second. And then the moment he drops it, he's slowed half his speed. It's insane. He becomes so easy to kill when he's slowed down. Ramatra, Sigma, Junker Queen, Zarya, Winston, any of them that you want to take your pick. They all become super vulnerable the slower they get. So use your primary freeze on tanks when you can. Tip number 5. And if you watch my content, this shouldn't be a new concept to you. Use your ice wall to separate enemies. Now, wall does have several different functions that you can use it for, but for me, at least 75% of the time, I'm using wall to separate enemies to secure kills or force out enemy abilities. And 75% of the time that I'm using that wall, I'm using it on tanks because they're typically the least mobile and it's easier to secure those kills. And even if you don't get those kills, they're wasting a lot of abilities just getting out of your wall. Orisa is my favorite example for this because right when you throw up a wall behind an Orisa, she tends to waste her spin, her fortify, which is after that, she's basically free pickings. Unless she has her ultimate, because that's basically get out of jail free card too sometimes. But use your wall to force out those abilities, and then once you drop wall, you can just kill her for free. Unless they have Suzu. Oh, don't get me started. But like I said, using Mei wall to separate enemies is going to probably be one of the biggest values that you can get as a Mei player. That's why I've said it before and I'll say it again. Mei's value isn't really in the damage that she gets, and it's a stat that you can't really track. It's in the opportunities she creates for your team to secure kills and win team fights. So that's why if you're playing Mei and you got people hating on you because your damage count is so low, don't worry about it. Your value that you get isn't something that Overwatch can track. And if you're doing the things that I tell you, you're most likely getting value, probably really good value for your team that are also securing the kills. If your other DPS has a high amount of elims and so does your tank, you're most likely providing those opportunities for them to do that. So don't worry about it. Ignore them. Keep doing your thing. If you feel like you're getting value, keep playing Mei. It's not your fault that other Overwatch players don't understand how Mei works. Tip number 4. Mei's ultimate Blizzard isn't really that great right now. And that I know that's going to differ depending on what rank you're at, but at least like Diamond and above, Blizzard's not really that great of an ultimate. So before I get started, if you're below that and you're getting like huge freezes and like getting a ton of limbs with your Blizzard, then keep doing you. Don't worry about this. But once you get up into higher ranks, you're going to notice that Mei's Blizzard is really hard to get value with. Now, tracking abilities and getting big freezes aside, you can also use freeze to counter enemy ultimates. I do this in a select handful of scenarios. Kitsune Rush is probably the easiest one to do this with. Enemy Kitsune Rush comes out, you can throw your freeze right in the middle of it. That's going to stop them from pushing up into it and using that to its fullest. This is going to buy your team crucial time to rotate out of the Kitsune Rush so they don't die in the process. It's essentially what we call a zoning ult and prevents the enemy team from pushing up into you during the ultimate. Now, you can use this for a few other ultimates, including Roadhog ult, Wrecking Ball Mines, Ramatra's Annihilation, an enemy Mei's Blizzard. You can even use it after a D.Va has used her bomb. Fun fact, if you throw it right after she throws her bomb, it's actually going to freeze her and prevent her from getting her mech back. And you don't have to worry about her eating your Blizzard. It's kind of a win-win. Blizzard can be used to zone out a few other ultimates as well, but again, these are going to be very situational. But again, don't be afraid to use it. If you want to zone out enemy pushes, it's great. Oh, actually, I wanted to say nano tanks too. Any nano tanks, use that freeze to prevent them from pushing up. That's super important. God, I can't believe I almost forgot about that. Tip number 3, communicate. Now, depending on what hero you play in Overwatch, communication is either more important or less important. Now, unfortunately for you, Mei gets her value, like I said, from providing opportunities for your team to follow up on. And the best way to do this is to communicate with your team what you're going to do and when. More specifically, when you're going to use your wall, who you're going to use it on, and where. For example, let's say you're attacking on King's Row first point. The enemy has an Orisa, you have a Reinhardt, and you see that you can get a wall off behind that Orisa. So you say to your team, hey, I'm going to wall off this Orisa. When I do, let's push up into her. That communicates 3 things to your team. 1, to look for your wall. 2, which target to focus with it. And 3, what they need to do as a player to capitalize the most that they can on that wall. Put a ball behind us. I'm going to slow the ball. I'm going to wall him. Ball.
I'm smacking.
Now, as long as you communicate what you're doing and execute what you planned on doing, it's going to be up to your team to use that however they think that they're going to get the most value. So after you communicate, really it is up in the air. Now, with that being said, you might be thinking, Spooky, I'm in gold and nobody uses comms ever. What am I supposed to do? And yeah, obviously that sucks. But make those callouts anyways. Chances are you at least have one other teammate in comms, and they're going to find that information useful. And as a bonus, you narrating what you're going to do and when keeps you focused on why you're doing certain things you're doing. So it's even helping you play better. And it's a great habit to build as you climb the ranks of Overwatch because the higher you get, the more communication is used. So you're kind of just preparing yourself to play at a higher elo. Now, I'm going to say this with caution. If you call stuff out and people don't follow up with it, don't worry. Do not get frustrated. Do not get upset at your team. And we're going to call this like tip 3, chapter 2 or something. Don't create expectations for the rest of your team. When you're in Overwatch, the only thing you can control is you and how you play. The moment you start worrying about how your teammates are playing, you're going to start underperforming yourself. So I will say from experience, the more frustrated, the more angry you are, the worse you play. And typically when a lot of Overwatch players get angry, unfortunately, they tend to take it out on their teammates. And I have not met a single Overwatch player that plays better when somebody else yells at them. I don't know what people are trying to accomplish when they start ragging on other players. It literally makes 0 sense to me. The only reason I can think of is that you don't want to climb ranks, so you just yell at your teammates. So yeah, anyways, don't care what other people are doing. Communicate as best as you can. Let them figure out how to play best with it. Because guess what? It's not going to fit the mold of exactly how you want them to play the game. They're going to play the game in the way that they know. So focus on yourself, you ding-dongs. Boop. Tip number 2, and this is like a very global tip. Obviously, with Mei being such an opportunistic DPS, you need to have a high level of awareness in the game. Now, fortunately for you, that's pretty easy to practice and just takes a little bit of time, I guess, and focus. But essentially, your goal is to not tunnel vision. You want to always be gathering as much information as you can while you're playing. For example, even if you're thinking about walling off the tank as they're pushing in, you might also be wary of where the DPS are flanking, what kind of heroes they're playing, what kind of abilities they may have. It's all this like global thought of just having as much information as you can as a player to make good, thoughtful decisions. And the best way to do that is just to always have your ears and your eyes open. Always be looking for more information as you play the game. Always be looking to make better decisions. The moment you feel yourself tunnel visioning, take a step back, relax a little bit, take a deep breath, and then start to look at the game as a whole and what's happening. If you notice that you're not getting much value anymore, or your walls are really bad, or you're not getting any eliminations, or you're not pressuring anybody, or your team's just really struggling, before you start pointing fingers, please, I beg of you, try to start being more aware. And I say this because this happens to me all the time. When I start playing poorly, it's usually because I'm tunnel visioning, and it takes me usually like 2 to 3 games to realize, oh wow, I've been tunnel visioning these last 2 games, and I literally have been playing like utter shit. Anyways, yeah. Make smart decisions. And finally, my number 1 tip to being literally the best player that you can possibly be. Have some fun. And I'm not saying this like, oh yeah, most important thing when you're playing games is to have fun. No, quite literally, the most important thing to do when you're trying to rank up is to relax. Have fun. Don't stress out. Don't get frustrated. And that itself is probably the hardest skill to master. Because what happens when you're not relaxed anymore or not having fun is that you start to get angry. You start to get frustrated. You start communicating passive-aggressively to your teammates, which tears your team morale down. And guess what? Overwatch is one of the most team-centric games. And if you're out there tearing your team's morale down, you're going to set the record for the quickest lost Overwatch match in history. That means don't complain about having a Mercy OTP, having the player on your team that's 2 tiers below you, complaining that you have the highest amount of damage in your lobby, which, by the way, just gonna say it, damage doesn't mean shit in this game. Stats in Overwatch really don't tell any kind of story. That means damage doesn't really mean that much. The amount of healing that somebody outputs doesn't really mean that much. As we just learned from Mei typically having lower damage due to her value being placed elsewhere. But that goes for all the heroes. All the heroes get value in different areas. If you just wanted to get the highest damage stat every single game, you'd just be playing like Junkrat or Bastion or Ferret, like just high damage heroes every single game. But there's a reason that those heroes aren't always meta. Actually, fun fact, they're typically not meta because value comes in all shapes and forms in Overwatch. And that's why I personally freaking love this game. I'd probably say the only stat that really tells you much in Overwatch is the death count. If everyone on your team has like 6 deaths and one person has like 14 deaths, let's be real. High death count usually means that that person's just positioning really poorly. Extra tip, don't die. But for real, have fun, enjoy it, focus on your own gameplay, and stop getting so frustrated and toxic with your teammates. When I say that that probably is the biggest factor in why I remain consistently GM top 500, like, yeah, I'm pretty good at the game, but I'd say that like I don't perform any better than like an average diamond or master player. What separates me from the crowd is my ability to communicate effectively and also just have fun, stay relaxed, create a positive environment for my team. I can't overstate that enough. And I'm going to repeat it. I'm pretty sure I'm top 500 because I'm not toxic. That doesn't mean be fake positivity. That just means have fun. Worry about your own gameplay. Don't get stressed. Stay relaxed. And an awesome side effect of that is, guess what? Everyone's going to enjoy the game more. So if you're queuing up for Overwatch wanting to be angry and toxic, fine. You can enjoy it. You can play the game however you want. Just know that that's hindering you from climbing up the ranks. Just objectively. It's like every single time I queue up into a game and I already have a team that's like goofing around with each other, like cracking jokes. Not even focused on the game, just like talking about whatever. It doesn't even matter. Just talking about like the latest news trend or something. In my mind, I'm immediately like, holy shit, we're about to roll this game. We've established that we're open to communicate with each other. It's an amazing feeling. So contribute to that. Make sure you talk to your team. Make sure you have fun. Make sure you stay relaxed. And if you find yourself ever struggling to climb, or you're stuck in a rut, or you're losing games, or you're just getting frustrated with Overwatch, come back to this video, watch these tips, reset your mental, and get back in that game once you've taken a nice little breather, a nice little break from the game. Get back in there, apply these tips, and I guarantee you're going to be breaking some new barriers. And yes, I did just make an Overwatch pun. Anyways, again, my name's Spooky, top 500 Mei player. If you want to come catch me live, come watch me at twitch.tv/TSG_Spooky. Feel free to introduce yourself. I'd love to talk to you. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video. Let me know what your favorite tip was below, or maybe a tip that you have that you want to include in this. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Make sure to keep it spooky. Peace.